he didn't put himself out there as like a low level dude. Like he would play it up like, man, like I don't take anything less than 200 keys, 500,000 keys, whatever. So these guys were hiring him to transport in one operation, $250 million worth of cocaine. And in the book, it's one of the first sort of big ops that we flesh out. The Medellin cartel calls Martin, like, we got a big shipment. We want to smuggle $250 million worth of cocaine into Miami. And we want you to do it for us. So Martin said, okay. And the way they did it was that the Colombians flew an airplane over the ocean and airdropped it into the Caribbean. And Martin, with a whole team of FBI agents who were working undercover, collected the cocaine, which were in like 100-pound bales, dozens of them floating in the sea, and they're in the ocean in the middle of the night. And no one knows that they're actually FBI agents, so they have to like actually evade law enforcement because if they get caught by the Coast Guard doesn't know that they're FBI. So there's a whole host of issues here. And they collected all the drugs and they brought it in. But it's like, you need a very special type of smuggler who can pull that off. Obviously, the FBI gave Martin a lot of the resources to complete the ruse. But Martin, as an individual, needed to be able to like actually do this and know how to do it. And in the eyes of the Colombians, there's not many people who had that sort of skill. So they trusted him with bigger deliveries and bigger deliveries. And as those deliveries started getting seized further down the line, once they're in Miami, once they're being transported to other states, the gambler's fallacy employed by the Colombians forced them to try to make up for their loss, to do a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one.
What's the gambler's fallacy?
Gambler's fallacy is that...
Which, by the way, we should set this up. You know a thing or two about cards. And
I do. Gambler's fallacy is basically like, I think of it in two ways. If you win on roulette, you think just because you just won, you're going to win again. And to some respect, if you're losing, you think, well, if I bet big and I win, everything will be okay. And that's what the Colombian cartels did. And Martin played them like a fiddle, to that end, because there was so much plausible deniability that pushed the blame away from Martin and to someone else along the chain. They always coordinated the bust so that there would be a fall guy somewhere else along the cartel's distribution network. It was never when Martin was in control of the drugs. But he always had like little things that he did that would almost sabotage or make use of the cartel's own inner workings. So it would be almost that we're them working against each other, for example. That delivery, the $250 million delivery, Martin told them, like, look, I know this is a big delivery for you guys. I'm going to make sure it's secure. Like, I'm going to hook you guys up. When I deliver this to your guys in Miami, it's going to be secure. Martin put the bales in 55-gallon metal drums and tack welded the lids on top. So you have to use a blowtorch to open the bales or open the barrels to get to the bales. And he put them into a moving truck, like a U-Haul or something similar, and brought it to the cartel's safe house, which was like a little bit of a warehouse in South Miami. Knowing full well that the dudes who would receive this didn't have the necessary equipment to open the barrels, because he had taken notes on how they did their drop-off, pickup, breakdown, repackage, yada, yada. So he's like, okay, I'm going to screw them a little bit. So then the dudes who are supposed to be unloading the stuff had to call their bosses. And then everyone has to come down to the warehouse and figure out how to get past this problem. What does that give the FBI? Instead of 6 mid-level, low-level dudes, packers, now they got 25. They got a whole cell that they can just raid. So they did things like that.
That's amazing. chess, not checkers, right? Like that. It just sounds 100%. Like he was thinking 2, 3, 4 moves
and that's
ahead.
Why, like, when Martin told me these stories, and as I was coming to truly understand what it meant to work a long-term covert operation, that's what it meant. Like, dude, like, people say, I worked undercover. You know, this was like a gripe Martin had about law enforcement in some way. I worked undercover. It's like, dude, like, throwing on a black hoodie and like doing like a buy bust on the street corner for a 20 bag ain't working undercover. Working undercover is doing a magic trick for someone who doesn't know they're on a stage. Martin bent the reality of these people to the point where they had convinced themselves that Martin was one of them. It was to that point. It's like, and it wasn't, and also too, the FBI made sure that it wasn't like, okay, Martin, do one delivery with these guys, then we got him, then we're going to arrest him. That took 2 months. That was easy. No. He did one delivery. He did 2. He did 3. He did 10. He did 20. Because the FBI wanted to gather intelligence. In some ways, these undercover operations were less about busting people or indictments. They were, and they did get there, and all these dudes got indicted and they all went to jail and their networks were broken up. But what the FBI and what the White House and what all these people figured out by 1988 is that we don't know shit about what the cartels are doing. We don't know how they're doing it. We don't know how what their methodologies are, how they think about these things. We need someone to be on the inside so we can gather that intelligence and use that as a foundation for future cases.
Well, it says a lot about where the FBI leadership and even, let's call it, national leadership was at that point, to be able to have the sort of tactical patience to say, hey, we're not going to just score quick wins. Because that's a lot of times you'll run into this. So those sort of like mid-level leaders in places like the FBI or CIA or other places where they'll want to get the win now or this year sort of thing. And the patience to be able to put a guy out there. And by the way, these operations, I'm sure you could speak to this a little bit, they're not cheap to run for a place like the FBI. These are expensive operations to run.
The cool thing is that since Martin, Manny, was so good at being a smuggler, he would charge the cartel millions of dollars to move this shit. And then they would just fund the operation with the cartel's money.
So smart. So smart.
So
that
free.
Answers the question, right? Of like, well, what do you do with the money that you seize? Oh, you keep funding undercover operations. You make it work against the guys that earned it. That's amazing.
Yeah. So they use the cartel's money to fund the operations against them. But to your point, it was like there were a lot of smart people in the FBI at that time. A lot of the SACs in Miami, in all the other big cities, a lot of the national coordinators in DC, people at DOJ, like they understood that this was the way forward. And they, at least compared to today, so I'm told, the leash for undercover operations back then, especially for Martin, was really quite long. They did stuff back then that you would never get to do today. Airdrops in the Caribbean and shit. Like, no way. No way.
You hear that in a lot of different places of the government of like, oh, they used to, what they used to be able to do before. I mean, they were writing the playbook back then. This was before the, too many of the lawyers and like the people that wanted to put their brand or their rules on there. Too many things went wrong, to where the bureaucracy eventually gets a hold of any process, right? Martin was doing this at a time where, like you said, he was the first to do it. Like he's writing the book on it.
Yeah, he was the first to do it. And
who's going to tell him no?
And the thing was too, is that Martin quickly realized that evidence collected undercover is nearly unimpeachable in court. So when they were getting convictions based on this stuff, they didn't give a shit. They're like, these dudes are implicating themselves on the wire. We have video of their plane. Like, how can you skirt around this, and I think that they really used that to their advantage in a similar way that, like, early tech companies, it was like move fast and break things, right? And maybe they operate under a similar principle, but they certainly had the results to back it up. But they didn't brag about it. Like when they made these busts, they would give the credit to other agencies to make sure the cartel didn't think it was the feds that had someone inside. Like they would make sure that like the state police did a routine traffic stop, 80 miles north of Miami in some bumfuck county, Central Florida, So it was like the FBI didn't want the public credit. If anything, they didn't want the public credit because the less credit that they took and the less the public knew what they were doing, the safer Martin would be.